I've been struggling with the CST-8 Monroe Mechanical Calculator, and I had downloaded from archive.org the few manuals that are available out there, and had been trying to use my tablet, and it just proved impossible to stare at the little tablet and look at the stuff. So I've printed out a bunch of stuff. I've gone to the local public library. They have a really nice color printer there, and for only $20 I got all these really nice prints printed out on nice paper and mounted them on foam board. Those prints came out of the CAA-10 manual, and the CAA-10 appears to be just the previous model to mostly my machine, and it does have a few extra features that my machine doesn't have. And the next closest has been the Model 6N, which looks to be pretty contemporary to my machine, and it has also more of those features. These two machines appear to be roughly the equivalent machine, and with the 6N being kind of a further extension, I noticed that they had to put like an extra motor, powerful motor in it, which is interesting enough, driven by a timing belt. So it's interesting happenstance that I'm doing a timing belt with a stepper motor, and they did that. I didn't realize that had been done until I looked at this manual, so interesting happenstance. And before that, I'd been mostly focusing on the service manuals. There's a total of 6 manuals, of which unfortunately there's only 4 available on archive.org. It'd be nice to have the later 2 ones, because it sounds like it's one of those later ones that actually might specifically cover my machine. The first manual just covers basic electricity, and it wasn't terribly useful, but the second and third are actually quite useful, especially when they're covering things like how the planetary gear mechanism works and so forth. The book 2 is for the LA series appears, and the book 3 is for the MA series, which are precursors to my machine, and some of the mechanics are, notably different, but a lot of the principles are the same, and it's carried over. Some of the bits and pieces look very similar, if not the same, also, so it's helpful. The third book, the fourth book, unfortunately covers a totally different calculator. It's completely non-family to any of this stuff, so a bummer that one doesn't seem to be particularly useful for my dilemmas. So at this point, I'm going to start focusing more on the CAA-10 book. I've done a few little struggles with the machine, and it does work a little bit better right now, but it's still jamming and so forth and having odd things, and I'll go into that to a little bit here. So for maybe a week or two now, maybe it's not been that long, it's only a few hours in the evening and a weekend for a few hours. I've struggled on getting this thing to clear and unjam and everything else, and it's kind of been, you find a point to lubricate and things might work a little bit better and then kind of get all flaky again. And the biggest progress today has been thanks to the manuals. Even if they're not for the exact machine, I've been able to get this lead screw mechanism to move, that moves the carriage back and forth. The problem is there's some arms over here that lift the whole carriage up, and it clears all these gears so they don't smash into each other. That still isn't working, but if I hit the carriage shift buttons, lots of things happen, and then it eventually sets itself and it ends. And if I push the button for the other direction, it does the shifting, rotates the carriage, and ends. And then if I hold down the button, it'll just keep moving that lead screw and the carriage around. Presumably there's an interlock to prevent you from running it to a dead end, I would hope. That I don't see yet, the exact character of that, because it seems like you could just hold this down until the lead screw nut, the equivalent of, runs into this screw, or the carriage smashes into something. So I assume that they've interlocked that. That's probably to do with this guy here, which I know does, I think it did a division stop and a carriage stop. So I think this one might prevent that, and this guy over here I think might prevent that. So I think at some point there's some tabs or a full stop on the carriage, and they'll probably hit either of these points, and even if you hold the button down, it'll hopefully prevent that from happening. And the thing that was preventing me from doing any of that was there's a little arm right here this guy was really seized up. I mean, it took a pair of pliers, and even now, well, I guess I almost can do it without pliers. Yeah, I can do it without pliers now. It was really seized up, and I put a ton of oil on it, ton of oil on it, ton of oil on it, and keep moving it back and forth, a little bit of movement that you can get on, and you finally could get it to move. And this little guy engages a roller against this cam, and this cam mechanism does quite a few different activities. I think it has like 3 or 4 different cam surfaces on it, and it is engaged by a little latch that pops in or out that this hook pops into, and it's a pretty critical thing there. And with that mechanism finally freed up, it unlatches this mechanism back here, which disengages this clutch. And as soon as the clutch is disengaged, then you can do quite a bit with the carriage motion. You can see right there, it disengaged this, everything they call a latch. You either you engage the latch or you disengage the latch. Right now the latch has been disengaged, and that allows all kinds of stuff to move. And then it relatches. And it was never able to relatch because this thing was just frozen, completely frozen. And there's a little catch inside this cam that does deploy in or out very nicely, and I've not, luckily that seems to move freely. I did put a few drops of oil on it thinking it might not be able to move, but it seems to move very nicely without my further intervention. The problem right now is, like I say, these arms need to move up and down. And I've got arms to move up and down like once after I hit the clear button. And that's the other thing that's been kind of nice. None of these buttons would move. And ever since I got this guy moving, I've been able to clear these buttons. And now there seems to be, I guess, nothing to clear. You would think it, regardless, you would be able to clear something. When I hit this button, this cam over here moved for the first time and lifted these arms very nicely. And then I haven't been able to get it to do it since then. There's another cam mechanism somewhere in here. It's quite a mystery. And I think that's the one that's supposed to normally move these arms up and down. And it seems to me it's very critical. These arms have to be up before the screw starts to move. Because otherwise you're going to have stationary gears and gears that are on the carriage, and they're going to collide. The whole carriage has to move up. And I did get, like I say, once with the clear buttons, which are these guys back, these 2 guys here. I got those to actually move these very ingenious mechanisms. These will move up and down, and there's a shaft that goes across the length of the carriage. Well, actually it's 2 shafts that go across the carriage, and these transmit a rotational force to some mechanisms in the carriage which I haven't looked at very carefully, and those clear the numbers dials on the carriage, which is really ingenious. So you hit these buttons here, it goes, transmits around, it rotates these guys, and click. And I saw them move them once, and they haven't moved since then. So perhaps the mechanism is set up such that it knows there is nothing to clear at the moment, so there's nothing to clear. And that's probably due to all these different shafts and so forth. I've yet to really follow through on that, but I'm pretty excited. I finally got this to go after grinding along for a long time, not getting anywhere. So, yay, big victory.